I want you to imagine that you get a phone call late tonight. You answer it, and it's someone here at church, a friend, and they're asking for some advice. The situation is that at their work, there's a conflict between two Christians. They're both mature Christians. They both are active in their church and have a good reputation at work, except they do not get along with each other. And the non-Christians there have noticed this and are concerned and surprised that they would have such a lack of love for each other. And this person who's calling you is saying, what do I do? How do I help this situation? What would you say? This is the same situation that the Apostle Paul faces in the chapter in front of us, Philippians chapter 4. If you remember from last week, Paul is in jail. He's hundreds of miles away from this church that he planted, the Philippian church. They send him a visitor, and in encouraging him and giving some supplies to him, he learns through this visitor that there's two mature women in the church, godly women in the church, who are just at odds with each other and not getting along at all. And the question is, what is Paul, hundreds of miles away from this situation, what could he do about it? Well, if you remember last week, we learned that what Paul did is, in chapter 1, he immediately went and poured the power of prayer upon the situation. If you remember, he prayed specifically for their love to increase. Church-wide for their love to increase, but particularly these two women, please, Father, let their love increase. Let that increase in understanding of what real love is, that it's action that seeks another person's highest good, and then how to apply that to their situation. Let these women see that their job is to get over their conflict and seek each other's welfare. So Paul did not sit by when he heard this as he's sitting in jail and say, well, that's hundreds of miles away, what can I do? Paul said, no, I'm moving in with the power of prayer and praying that their love for each other would increase. And we learn from that, man, when we see Christians in conflict, move in, don't move away. Don't stand at a distance wringing your hands. What can we do about this? Move in with the power of prayer to be able to infuse love into their relationship. Now this week we want to complete the story, having jumped from chapter 1 last week to chapter 4 this week, where Paul takes 3 further steps to help fix this relationship between these two Christians. And again, we need to listen to this. Christians today have just as much conflict as they did back then. And Paul's example teaches us what we can do to help when we see other Christians not getting along well. These are 3 steps that we're going to look at, 3 steps that I follow when I counsel people, and 3 steps that you should note. You will meet Christians who don't get along. Maybe you know some Christians. Maybe you are one of the Christians that's not getting along. These 3 steps will help to be able to resolve. So let's begin by reading about the 2 Christians having a conflict. Chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. It says, therefore, my beloved brethren, whom I long to see, my joy and my crown, in this way stand firm in the Lord, my beloved. I urge Euodia and I urge Syntyche to live in harmony in the Lord. Indeed, true companion, I ask you also to help these women who have shared my struggle in the cause of the gospel, together with Clement and the rest of my fellow workers whose names are in the book of life. Okay, here's the situation. What do we learn about it? Number 1 involves 2 women, one named Euodia and one named Syntyche. You know, a lot of people like naming their kids Bible names. I don't see those very much. We should need to work on that. Euodia and Syntyche. They're not mentioned anywhere else in the Bible, so we really don't know much about them, but there are some clues scattered around that we can learn about them. If you remember, in Acts chapter 16, Paul was entering the city of Philippi. It says, on the Sabbath day, we went outside the gate to a riverside, where we were supposing that there would be a place of prayer, and we sat down and began speaking to the women who had assembled. This is Paul's very first contact with the Philippians, and it's down on a Saturday morning by the river at a place of prayer, and he finds some women praying there. And there he met Lydia. If you remember, he led her to Christ, and her whole household came to Christ, and it looks like the church met in her house. And it wouldn't be surprising, in fact, it's quite likely that he also met Euodia and Syntyche there at the riverside. It says in verse 3, their names are written in the book of life. So that tells us something about these two women. Number one, they aren't just random people. They are two Christian women, and not just Christians. If you look at verse 3, it says, these women who have shared my struggle in the cause of the gospel. Paul said he struggled to present the gospel in Philippi. If you remember, that was the same city where he was preaching the gospel, cast out a demon out of a young woman. The town gets very upset. They beat him, throw him in jail. This was a struggle. In fact, that word struggle literally means labor and exhaustion. But this was exhausting for Paul to be in Philippi. You didn't just share the gospel. It was nasty. And who, however, was right there with him? It says, these two women, look at the word shared in my struggle. These two women shared that. That word is an intense word. It means to fight along with, to labor intensely along with somebody else. So that tells us not only were they Christians, they were devoted workers of Christ. They were right there on the front lines. Paul is not painting the picture of some women who helped behind the scenes, maybe making some food or giving some water to Paul as he went around. That is an important ministry. But these women had a very different ministry of being shoulder to shoulder with Paul on the front line, sharing in this struggle that he was going through. Philippi was a Roman headquarters for that area, and that was a big deal because they could come in saying Jesus is Lord in a town where the belief was Caesar is Lord. And it would have been risky, and it would have been hard to be able to do what they did. And yet these women were right there alongside Paul, standing up, working, laboring to the point of exhaustion along with Paul. So these were special women. They were deeply devoted Christian women, and yet they had a real serious conflict with each other. Note that. You can be very, very godly and still have great conflict with others. We know this was a serious conflict because as we read Paul's letters, how many letters are in the New Testament? He normally at the very end will list off a whole bunch of people that he wants to have greetings, but he hardly ever mentions people in the middle of the letter. And the few times he does mention people in the middle, it's either something they did extremely well or extremely badly. Right here in the heart of this letter to the Philippians, he mentions these women, and that meant this was a serious problem, not just a offhanded, little spat. It had come to him hundreds of miles away in jail in Rome, and certainly was known to everybody there in the church. And so he's thinking, this has to be dealt with. This is a bad situation going on. So what do? You've got two deeply committed women having a severe problem of conflict in the church. What does Paul do? As we saw before, he doesn't just sit on his hands. Notice what he does in verse 1. His first step is in verse 1 here. It says, therefore, my beloved brethren, whom I long to see, my joy and crown, in this way stand firm in the Lord. All right, so Paul is speaking to the entire congregation, and he gives them a command, one command in this verse. What is it? Stand firm in the Lord. Stand firm in the Lord. What exactly is he telling them to do? If I told you to stand firm, under what circumstances would that apply? Well, most notably, if you were like walking along and there's some ice and you started to slip and you were wobbling and ready to fall over, I'd say, "Hello, stand firm, hold on." That would be an occasion that you would do that. And that is how they used it in Bible times. When a soldier was facing an enemy and the enemy's coming, the commanding officer would shout out, hold firm, stand your ground. Don't slip back against this enemy. So that's how they use this word in Bible days, but we're not talking about an enemy here. What does it say? It says, stand firm in the Lord. In other words, hold your ground. Don't fall back. Stand firm and don't slip in your relationship with the Lord. That's what he's saying to them. Why is he telling the whole church, hey, stand firm in your relationship with the Lord? Well, why would you ever tell anybody to stand firm in their relationship with the Lord? Because they weren't. Because they were wobbling, unsteady in their stand with God. And so he says, hey, you need to make sure your relationship with God, with Jesus Christ, is strong. That's what he's saying. And that is the first step to resolving conflicts between Christians. In your insert, ask about their relationship with Jesus. Ask about their relationship with Jesus. That's the first thing Paul does. The whole congregation, how is your relationship with Jesus? Are you standing firm in it, or are you wobbling and unsteady in it? You know, very often when we have people in conflict, whether it be a husband and wife or an employee or employee, parent-child, we will say to them, hey, come on, just try harder to get along. And that's oftentimes good advice, but that's not where Paul starts. He could have said that to these women. Instead, before he says that to these women, he doesn't say try harder, he says draw closer to Christ. He's saying the first thing that needs to be addressed here is your relationship with Jesus, because you're having this conflict. The key to resolving conflicts is located in our relationship with Jesus. Can I say that again? The key to our resolving conflicts is located in our relationship with Jesus. So he's saying, hey, you Euodia, you Syntyche, I'm hearing hundreds of miles away that you're not in conflict, that you're in conflict with each other, and that's telling me something very clear. You're not standing firm in the Lord. You're wobbling in your relationship with Jesus Christ. And the first thing I'm telling you is make sure you're standing firm in him. The fact conflicts is going on is red flags that there's a relationship problem going on with Jesus prior to this conflict that you're having. In your insert, I put this. When our relationship with Jesus is weak, we will have weak relationships with others. When our relationship with Jesus is weak, we will have weak relationships with others. Colossians 1:16 says, by him all things were created, all things have been created through him and for him. Why were you created? For Jesus. It's not like you have your life and you're living along, and when you've got your problems, you call on Jesus and he helps you, and then you keep going. No, the whole purpose you are here on this earth, that you were created, was for him, you and him. That's why you were created, to have this firm relationship with him. It says in Acts 17, he is the God who made the world and everything in it. His purpose was so that the nations should seek after God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him, for in him we live and move and exist. This is saying his life is our life. That's what it's saying. In him we live and move and exist. It's in his life that we live our lives. That's how it was created. That's how the situation is supposed to work. And when we are distant from him, we are distant from life. If we don't have a close relationship with him, there's no way we can have a close relationship with others. It's the vertical first and then the horizontal. St. Augustine said, you have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you. What a beautiful thing, and a very biblical truth. We were made for God, and we are just not going to be ourselves or have life fall into place and work right until we find our rest in him. Make sure that describes you today. He is what you are hungering for. He is who you are thirsting for. What you're looking for to fill that empty spot in you is him. Make sure that's true of you. I have a relative who told me, hey, look, whenever you see me acting the way I shouldn't act, asking me how my relationship with Jesus is. And that's exactly right. The one thing I've learned as a pastor over all these years, when someone comes to me with a conflict, or a trouble or a struggle that they're going through, one of the first things I'll ask them is, how is your relationship with Jesus? How close are you and Jesus right now? And it is very common for the person to kind of hang their head and say, I've been not walking close with Jesus at all. And that is a huge part of why things aren't going right. It's like you unplug yourself unplug the lamp from the wall and then wonder why isn't the light going on? You have to be plugged into a close relationship with Jesus for your life to work right. You were made for him. He is your life. Where do you begin to help resolve a conflict between two Christians? Find a way to ask how their relationship with Jesus is. Look for that opening and opportunity. Are they standing firm or is it wobbling? It's got to be firm to resolve problems. If you today are in conflict with another person, I ask you, how is your relationship with Jesus? How close are you walking with Jesus? Fix that first. And very often you'll see that the other naturally works itself out. All right, first step, ask about the relationship with Jesus. Second step, found in verse 2 of our chapter. He says, I urge Euodia and I urge Syntyche to live in harmony. Live in harmony. What exactly is he saying there? It's more than just, hey, women, get along. It's much more than that. That word harmony is used in other passages as a thinking word. He's telling them to do something with their minds. Let me show you those passages. In Matthew 16, Jesus turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are not, and here's the word, setting your mind on God's interests, but man's interests. You're not in harmony with God's interests. You're not setting your mind on God's interests, but man's. He says in Colossians 3:2, set your mind on, same word, the things above, not on the things that are on the earth. So we could translate what Paul is saying to these women as, hey, you two women, make sure you're setting your mind on the same things. Right now you're conflicting because of your differences going on. Don't set your mind on your differences. Set your mind on the things that unite yourselves together, not the things you disagree on. And that's the second step that Paul takes here in your insert. Help them to focus on their unity. In dealing with people in conflict, Christians in conflict, help them focus on their unity. Their unity. Think of a past conflict that you've had with another Christian. Can you think of that for a moment? Think about what went wrong. If you start thinking about that too much, do you maybe start getting a little irritated and angry and like, oh yeah, that guy did that to me? That's thinking on your differences, which God says, don't do that. Instead, think about the things that you have shared unity over, the things that you both agree on, not your differences, but on what you agree on. That person may have offended you, never said they were sorry to you, caused a problem that you're still dealing with today, and you can focus on that. God says, don't do it. Focus on the things that you have in harmony, the things that unite the two of you. Well, what unites us all together as Christians? There's a beautiful passage in Ephesians chapter 4. It says in verse 2, be patient and bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope. When you were called, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. In our churches, Satan prowls about seeking to create disunity, to get us to focus upon our differences. There are lots of differences among us. We can spend all day long thinking about how each of us is different from the other person. God says, don't think about your differences. Think about what you are united on. Yes, you've got differences, and some of those differences cause problems. What does he say to do here when we have faults and flaws with each other? Look at the top there. Be patient and bearing with one another. That's what we're supposed to do with our differences, to be patient and be bearing with our differences when we have conflicts. And how much effort are we supposed to put into that bearing with and patience? Look at it. It says, make every effort. So that is, someone does something that is annoying or irritating to you, but you make the effort to be patient and bear with them, and then you do it again, and you do it again, making every effort to do it again. Why? Because you're trying to keep unity, to focus on the unity. These differences can divide us, so make every effort to focus on the unity. And what things unite us? Look at the list here. Look at this. We are one body in Christ. We have the same Spirit. Our hope is in heaven. We have our Lord. We have our faith. We have our baptism. We have our God and Father. All these things unite us. We're all focused on that. And that God and Father who are united on, where is he? It says he is over and through and in all of us. He's over and through and in me, and he's over in and through you and all the people around us, all of us here. God the Father is over and through and in all of us, and that unites us together. And that is what Paul is saying. Spend your time focusing on that, not on how different you are and how you both disagreed over this issue. Don't focus that. Set your mind upon what unites you. Picture a person that you've had a conflict with, a Christian. Picture them in your mind. Now think of them uniting with you on the same issues of the body and the Spirit and hope and Lord and faith and baptism and God the Father. They're a Christian. They love that. And you love that. That's what God says to set our minds on. The second step for resolving conflict between Christians is to help them to focus on their unity, not their differences. What if only one of the people involved will agree with that and focus upon the unity? The other wants to focus on the difference. Well, you can only control yourself, so encourage that one person. Hey, be patient with them, bear with them, focus on what would you have. And if you're that person in a relationship, I encourage you, focus on what you can control, and that is be patient with that person, bear with that person, focus on the things that unite you instead of letting that rehearsal of what they did to you continue to be filling your mind. Rehearse in your mind how the two of you share so many things in common. Because the truth is that you have far more that unites you with this woman or man than what separates you. Far more unites you than what separates you. God says focus on that, and you'll help resolve conflicts. So that's the second step, and Paul says to do that. Live in harmony. Think about the same things, not different things. The third step for resolving conflict is also found in verse 3. He says, "Indeed, true companion, I ask you also to help these women." Here Paul addresses someone we have no idea who he's addressing. He calls them his true companion. That word means my teammate. There was apparently someone there in the church of Corinth that he called my teammate, that this person and probably everybody else knew who it was referring to. Someone so close to Paul that they were like, companions, colleagues, just them and Paul. And Paul is saying to this person, help these women. And that gives us our third step for resolving conflict between Christians, and that is ask godly people to get involved. That's what Paul does here. Ask godly people to get involved. Paul says, look, I just told these women that I want them to think on the same thing, unite together on the same things. I want you to help them do that. Step in there and help these women. Get involved in this situation. Paul told the same thing to all the Galatian Christians. In Galatians 6, he says, if another Christian is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly, note that, help that person back onto the right path. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way, obey the law of Christ. Often when we see two Christians in conflict with each other, we say, man, can't they just get along? What does God say here, though? God says, move in and help carry their burdens. If you're walking out to the car after church today and you see someone with a stack of boxes that they're trying to carry and they're not doing well, You could say, man, why don't they just carry those better? Or you could move in and help them carry the boxes. That's what God says we're supposed to do. You see two Christians in conflict with each other, don't just say, that's a shame. Say, God says, help them carry that burden. Help them carry that burden. And he says here, that is called what? Obeying the law of Christ. Obeying the law of Christ. It says in John 13:34, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. So you must also love one another. This is Jesus' commandment to us. Love each other. Just how? Just as much as he loved us. How much has Jesus loved us? He sacrificed everything to make our lives better. That's how we're supposed to love each other. To sacrifice everything, whatever it takes to make our lives better. To carry each other's burdens. So here Paul calls this unnamed Christian, who he calls as his teamwork, team companion, to help these women. Help these women in this work. And that is what you and I must do when we see Christians in conflict. Is there a godly Christian that you know that could move into this conflict you see with other Christians? Maybe there's someone that's quite close to them that both of these Christians respect, like a pastor or a family member or a just Christian at work or church, that would be a really good person to call in and to help these two Christians work out their problems. That's what this step teaches us. That's what I often do. If I don't know somebody, is there someone in your family? Is there someone in your church that could help the situation? Bring in a third party. But the warning that I would give is that you might be that third party. God might want to use you to be able to help two Christians get their relationship back together. Is that something you could do? Remember, you got to do it the right way. Remember, it said to gently and humbly help the person. Sometimes Christians are eager to jump in and knock heads together and say, what's wrong with you? And it's not gentle or humble, it's harsh and proud. If you're not gentle and humble, you're not ready to do it. Harsh and proud must not take place. But to do that, you could start by simply going to one of the people and saying, hey, I sense there was some tension between you and so today. Would you like to talk about that? Just help one of the parties just to talk and to get it out. You could ask about their emotions. How are you feeling about what's going on here? You could ask about what they think is the core issue. What's the root problem that you see between the two of you? You could ask, you could point out that, look, Satan wants you through all this to get divisive. Are you struggling with any anger? Are you struggling with any unforgiveness because of what's going on? And let them talk it out. Is that being a busybody and sticking your nose in where it shouldn't be? It could be if you go in with the wrong attitude. But if you go in with the attitude of humility and want to help fix a broken relationship, you're doing exactly what God has commanded you to do in helping carry another person's burden. That's what God tells us to do. And yes, that can be really scary and risky. But again, we're not supposed to just watch others carry their burdens. We're supposed to help each other carry our burdens. So the third step in resolving conflict between Christians is ask godly people to get involved and be prepared, because that might be you. So here's a sermon on how to help Christians get along with each other. Why is that so important? Why spend a whole sermon on this? Because we're all a mixed bag of good behavior and bad behavior, right? I am. You are. And that means that we, in spite of our differences, need to work hard at loving each other anyway. And in spite of our differences, we need to be patient and bear with one another and give all the effort we can to forgive and just Be kind and loving and focus on what unifies us. And the big reason that we need to do this, not just to have peace in our church, but one of the huge reasons we need to do this, listen to this, is because others are watching us. Non-Christians, the world, are watching our behavior as a church. Remember what Jesus said, John 13:34, by this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. How will people know? By our love for one another. It says in John 17, Jesus prayed, my prayer for all of them is that they will be one, just as you and I are one, Father, that just as you are in me and I am in you, so they will be in us. And look at this, and the world will believe you sent me. You know, if someone applies for membership here at Samuel's Church, we have them fill out a form about what they believe. You know, Scripture teaches about important doctrines. And once they get that all down and review it, then if it's all in harmony with the Bible, we accept them as fellow Christians. That, however, is not how the world outside these walls evaluates what a Christian is. It is not what we believe, by and large, that persuades another non-Christian to believe we're Christians. Jesus says it's how we treat each other in here that convinces them that we are Christians. Not just love in general, but love of the body of Christ is what convinces non-Christians. By this, people will know if we have love one for another. And when we are one, the world will believe that you sent me. It's a form of evangelism. When our church is united and loving and in harmony, that's a form of evangelism because others look at that and say, wow, maybe Jesus is someone worth taking notice of. Far too many churches are known for their being unloving and not united, divided. That church over there is just everyone's bickering and fighting and they don't get along. That is a terrible witness to the world. God says, work on your unity, not just for your own peace of mind, but for the salvation of the lost. You are showing them whether Christ is worth it or not. And if you're all divided and unloving toward each other, you're telling the world it's not worth it. He's not worth it. But when you are, you're convincing them in ways that you're trying to persuade them is much more powerful to show them what Jesus does to a group of people. Jesus says our being loving and united will show others that he is worth it, that he's worth pursuing. So let's wrap this up. Do you know any Christians in conflict? God would, number one, from last week, start praying that they love each other. And then from this week, ask them about their relationship with Jesus, because very often that's the key. Number two, help them focus on their unity, what unites them, not their differences. And then number three, if you can, ask a godly Christian to get involved to be able to help them. Paul couldn't in his jail cell, so he asks this other Christian. Maybe you're not able to help, but you know someone who could. Ask that person. But be prepared, it might be you. However, maybe you are one of the Christians in conflict with another Christian this morning. What does God say to you? God says you need to approach that other Christian. You need to forgive that other Christian for something that they might have done. You also need to tell them you are sorry for anything that you have done. And why? Because you're being watched. And your conflict is sending bad signals to those who need to see the love and unity of the church. The two of you are going to spend eternity together in heaven. Why not put aside the differences now and start experiencing that unity and that good life now? Not wait till then. Start experiencing it now. The lost will see it and they can come believe in Jesus because of it. So let's all help carry each other's burdens. When we see conflict, lovingly, humbly move in and help each other come back to unity again.